Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 96 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and Mike Koomar is with me. And today we're going over the Big 12 tournament preview. This is your league, Mike. You've got your Baylor Bears in here with potentially the most on the line of anybody in the conference. There's a couple results from over the weekend that I do want to get to that have ended up influencing this bracket. And Mike, let's start with the game. Really, the only game that I think we should actually talk about is what happened at Allen Fieldhouse, and it's Kansas who knocks off Arizona 83-76. Senior day for the seniors on Kansas, especially Hunter Dickinson, and he shows out with 33 points and 10 rebounds. Arizona's been playing some good ball, Mike. Kansas not really so much. This to me seems more it's going to affect Kansas more than just a normal win would. Maybe they start believing in themselves a little bit more after a really good performance like this.
Yeah, this was a huge win for Kansas. Like you said, Hunter Dickinson career high 33 points in this one. And look, Kansas has lost some games lately, but they've looked a lot better. They took Houston down to the wire. They lost by 6 points on the road at Houston. They dropped a tough game to Texas Tech. But I do think this Kansas team might potentially be getting back on track. Very helpful win on senior day for them. They had a balanced attack. Juwan Harris had 9 assists in this game. Hunter Dickinson with his double-double. Arizona also seems to be struggling a little bit. They actually fell out of the top 25. They had a bad loss. They lost by 17 points against Iowa State earlier. But they're definitely not as impressive. They're probably still on the 5-line, Sean, as you've illustrated. But I think they also have a lot to gain from potentially making a run here in the Big 12 tournament.
So here's, for the viewers at home, Mike, they can see my team sheet here. I have Arizona 17th overall, which is actually the first 5 seed. They're 13th in the net there, which is great. They're 12th over, or the average of 12 across the quality metrics, which is good. But the one thing that's sticking out and is probably costing them a protected seat at this point is this 25.3 average resume metric. Now, this is margins aside, who did you beat, who did you lose to, where did you play them? And at this point, that is costing Arizona a spot on the 4. Now, there's a lot of Big Ten teams on that 4. Maybe somebody loses. Arizona can take that spot back. But, Mike, you said this before we clicked record. They might have the most on the line here when it comes to seeding. And, you know, they're on the precipice of a protected seed, and it's called a protected seed for a reason. You're going to get a mid-major or low-major conference winner, and the odds of winning significantly go up if you're a 4 seed. And Arizona will likely get another chance at Kansas to start their tournament off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at that first game that Arizona's going to have, they're going to play Kansas in what's going to be a Jayhawk home game. Make no mistake about it. We've shared over the years my disdain for the Big 12 tournament being in Kansas City, but I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. That's going to be a really tough game for Arizona to go back and play another road game against Kansas.
It's going to be the latest game, too. 9:30 Eastern time, 8:30 local time. So you would think that, you know, the Kansas fans would be able to sort of have their day and still make the trip down there.
They're going to be there
to get to that game. That's probably the best slot for one of the. You know, I think there's 3 teams that can consider this one pretty close to home. That'd be K-State, Iowa State, and Kansas. And Kansas might have got the best slot to potentially utilize that the most.
Absolutely. And look out. I think Kansas could also jump up and do a whole lot if they can make a deep run in this tournament to boost their resume that has been lackluster this entire year. But, yeah, look out for Arizona. If they lose that first-round game, Sean, who knows? They could fall to a 6. But if they get the win,
I don't think so.
A protected seed is 100% on the line for them.
And for Kansas, too, Mike, I think they did actually jump 4 or 5 spots after that Arizona win. I have them as my last 7 seed right now. They're at 18th in the net. They're 25th across the resume metrics, which is pretty solid. It's essentially the same as Arizona. We're talking about decimal points better for the Wildcats. And then in terms of the quality metrics, Kansas is at 17.3, which is just a couple. Arizona's at 12. And you see this 17. The team right above them, Memphis, is averaging 49. So another good win could take Kansas up even further. Now a 6 seed might be 2 wins away, but maybe a better region on the 7 line is on the line for Kansas here, and with Indianapolis on the cards rather than California, maybe that's definitely something to play for if Kansas can do Arizona again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll be tough to win back-to-back games against the same team, but you've got 2 home games.
Yep.
So, and the Jayhawks have looked a lot more impressive. I think size-wise, it's an equitable matchup. Both teams have some good size down low. So that's going to be that might be the best game of the tournament, honestly, that quarterfinal. But look out for Kansas to potentially make a run.
And this tournament actually does get started later today by the time this video is released. But Mike, of the 8 teams playing on Tuesday here, none of them were slated to be in the NCAA tournament, so they would have to run the entire table to do so. None of the teams have shown that they can do that so far, and as fun and cool as a bid stealer in the Big 12 would be, I just don't think it's on the cards.
Yeah, I think that the only chance that you have a team that has any chance of getting into the big dance is probably TCU or Cincinnati. Cincinnati would probably have to get to the finals, as would TCU, and even then, still, probably neither team would get in. So I don't think we see a bid stealer. You got to play so many games, 5 games in 5 days, if you're going to win it all from one of these last seeds, and I don't see it happening.
So as we get to the second day, we have Kansas playing, like we mentioned. We have Iowa State, who fell to the 5th seed, and Mike, They haven't been playing their best ball recently. They went through a little bit of a rough patch with some players missing time with injuries. They got all them back. They had a few really nice games in there, but they I don't want to say the bottom has fallen out, but when they've had a couple ugly losses, which is not what TJ Otzelberger's team usually does. But they should be able to get a winnable first game in front of a home crowd on Wednesday, and then potentially they could get BYU on Thursday. But Mike, they're in a pretty good spot for the tournament, but this might just be a confidence thing. Can you put 2 good performances in a row?
Yeah, I really like Iowa State actually to run the table in this tournament. They've got a lot of history here. Iowa State fans call the T-Mobile Center Hilton North because their home court is Hilton Coliseum. They call this their home away from home, and it's because they continuously outperform the regular season in the Big 12 tournament. They've won it a bunch lately, and they had a nice confidence win this past Saturday with a 16-point dominating win at Kansas State after they lost to them at home earlier on in the year. They had that big win against Arizona last Saturday as well, just that tough hiccup against BYU in the middle of the week on Senior Day. But, yeah, I really like Iowa State to make a run and even take out Houston in the semifinal matchup.
And, Mike, I still have Iowa State as the 10th ranked team. That very much means that the last 2 seed is on the cards for them.
Yeah.
They're 9th in the net, which is good. Their resume averages 18th, but this KPI is at 26. That is a little bit of an outlier. You might, if you watch a college basketball show, you might start hearing bracketologists talk about the KPI being an outlier. There's probably 10 or 12 teams where this KPI number is totally out of the ordinary. So, the committee could just say, we're not going to take the KPI into consideration here. They're in the low teens in the resume. They're in the high single digits in quality. They're at 8.3 right now. So I think, maybe even just the BYU, if they're able to beat BYU, they might get thrust up into that last 2 seed. But still a lot on the line here for Iowa State. And maybe the panic button was a little bit too loud because they're still a really good team. And I think even if they do lose to BYU, they're still going to be pretty likely to win some games in the tournament. But that is something to to look out for early on, as they'll be in the first game on Wednesday. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I do not think that BYU is going to have luck again when they get to play Iowa State. I think that's going to be a big Iowa State win.
So let's go to the middle two games here. West Virginia is the 8th seed. They'll be playing at 2 o'clock Central. After Iowa State, they'll be playing the winner of TCU or Colorado. You wouldn't expect them to have much trouble there. Then they'd get Houston, and you wouldn't expect Houston to have much trouble there. But just let's give them a little update on West Virginia here, Mike. They had such a great start to the year. They've done enough where they'll be in the NCAA tournament. We've got them ranked 38th right now, actually one spot ahead of the next team that we're going to talk about, Baylor. But 38th across the resume, 44th across their quality. They're 9-12 in the top 2 quads with 4 Quad 1A wins. I think West Virginia has kind of gone under the radar here, kind of in a good way. And as long as they don't lose that first game, look, they'll still be in if they lose it too. But if they don't lose that first game, maybe just don't get blown out by Houston. See how long you could compete for. And then what are they going to be thinking going into this game and then into the tournament?
Yeah, I think West Virginia, they've been one of the most inconsistent teams in college basketball all year. And they've had some of the incredible upsets, like when they beat Kansas earlier on in the year. They played great in the battle for Atlantis for the most part. But coming down the stretch, I have not been as impressed with the Mountaineers. You look at some of these games that they've played. They lost twice to Brigham Young, including a 21-point thrashing on the road. They barely got out of the University of Utah, got out of Salt Lake City with a win. They got a 2-point victory over a not very good Utah team. And then on senior night, they kind of squeaked by against UCF. They had a big lead. They gave it up and then found a way to win that game. So they've been very inconsistent since Tucker DeVries has been out with an injury, and he will be out for the rest of the season. But I think they've got a chance to get right against TCU before they're lambs to the slaughter, I think, for the rest of the tournament.
And let's go down to game 1 of session 2. Mike, there's your Baylor Bears. They'll play the winner of Kansas State and Arizona State. The Sun Devils are down to like 5 players. They're incredibly injured, and that's why a couple of their results have been pretty ugly recently. You'd expect Kansas State with a little bit of a home crowd bump to get across the line here. And then, Mike, that sets up what'll end up being a pretty interesting game for Baylor. It will not be Quad 1 no matter who wins. And
it feels like it should be, though.
and it's essentially a road game, but that's not how it works. Even the teams going to play St. John's at the Garden, that is technically a neutral game for the Red Storm, too.
Yeah.
It hasn't been in the past, but it is this year. But, Mike, Baylor has been slipping. It's kind of been evident for a while. It's been pretty much the consensus that they've done enough to get in, and they still probably have. And as long as they leave this tournament with 1 win, they'll be fine. But talk about the mentality for Baylor coming into this one, and what are they looking to do here in the Big 12 tournament?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just been injuries. The injury bug has gotten Baylor worse than almost any other team I've ever seen, with maybe the exception of Arizona State this year. They've of their original starting lineup to start the season, that crew has missed a total of 42 games this year. That's almost unheard of. And on top of that, their starting center, who is really coming into his own, and Josh Ojanwuna, he is out for the rest of the season, tore his ACL against UCF. And that is kind of what has triggered this plummet down the board for them in the last couple of weeks. Look, this could have been pretty easy for Baylor if they had just taken care of business against Colorado and Cincinnati. 2 games they absolutely should have won, and they blew. And then we're not even talking about this. We're talking about Baylor getting a 9 seed, probably, maybe even an 8. But we are where we are, and they're going to have a really tall order playing against a Kansas State team that has outperformed Baylor ever since Jerome Tang took over as head coach. And he has done well against the man that he used to work for in Scott Drew. He just seems to have Baylor's number. Baylor squeaked by a win this year With that being said, Kansas State, they have underperformed coming down the stretch than what I expected. I expected Kansas State to make a run for the tournament after they beat Arizona, but they responded after that game by losing 4 straight, to include a loss at home against Arizona State. That was a pretty embarrassing loss for them. So, look, Kansas State, I think this is always going to be a tough matchup. I think Baylor, and I'm a very pessimistic Baylor fan right now, but I think they're going to find a way to get the job done against Kansas State and hopefully propel themselves to the quarterfinals. Baylor also has been terrible, even in the golden age of Baylor basketball, which has been the last couple of years. They've been terrible in the Big 12 tournament. I think they've only won 2 games in the last 5 to 6 years in the Big 12. So definitely a little bit of concern on some Waco faithfuls, but I do like Baylor to get the job done and to at least solidify an 11 seed.
And Mike, it doesn't really it isn't just with Baylor. I think there's just some teams that, like, the players may change, but they just don't play well in the conference tournament. It was a truth with my team for a really long time in Indiana, and Mike Woodson has done a little bit of a better job in that department, but there are just, like, even you go back to, like, the early 2000s, Mike, when Roy Williams called the ACC tournament a glorified cocktail party for the boosters. Like, they haven't done all that well either there.
Yeah.
Considering their program standards and where they stand, but Baylor is truthfully 1 win away from probably being safe. They are 3-5 since Ojonwa went down, if I'm not mistaken. If that's 3-6 with another loss to a non-tournament team, I could see the committee sending them to Dayton and telling them, all right, you got to prove your spot here in the field of 64, which after Dayton would be 64. But let's just take a look at Baylor's resume real quick. Here I have them down in 39th, 1 spot above Drake. This 42.7 number is pretty good when it comes to the resume numbers for Baylor. You see that essentially the same as these other bubble teams in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Indiana. And again, the KPI is not very favorable to the Bears. The net is, they're up to 33. And then in the performance quality metrics, Mike, this is where Baylor really shines. 27.7. They're in the top 30 in both the BPI and KenPom, and they're 31st in Torvik. So, again, there has been teams with those numbers who have gotten left out before, but they're 12-13 across their meaningful games, which the committee refers to as quads 1 through 3. If you can get one more win there, I think they'll be fine. But if they do lose it, I could see them, sort of falling into that Arkansas, Oklahoma, Indiana mess, and I could see them getting thrown into Dayton. But I don't think... Now, I don't want to guarantee it, but I do think that Baylor will hear their name called on Selection Sunday. But if you beat Kansas State, you'll probably not be playing that extra game. And considering the personnel issues that Baylor have right now, you don't want to play that extra game. So, they've had to really slow down the tempo just because their lack of bodies.
Yeah.
That's affected their ability to score the ball. They're just not a great half-court offensive team, but it's sort of by design because they have to.
Absolutely. And their starting center, who's playing almost 40 minutes a game right now, is Norchad Omir, who is, a rebounding machine, but he's 6'7". Yep. He's not. We're not getting the same type of performance out of him that we would be if Joshua Johnwin was in the lineup. And I think if Joshua Johnwin is in the lineup, honest opinion, and I know I'm a little biased, I think Baylor's top 15
they'll have
team.
one or two more wins than they have now.
I think I would argue that they would have probably 4 to 5 more wins. I think Baylor is a top 15 team with a healthy Joshua Johnwin in the lineup right now with everybody else healthy. But at the end of the day, it's college basketball. Injuries happen, and Baylor is where they are right now because of it. So we can only hope that the Bears can power through and get this win against Kansas State.
And in terms of how the committee has dealt with injuries, that's been something that's really changed over the years. If a player has come back from the injury and the team has played really well, it's not as if they disregard those games, but they heavily weigh them And then in terms of injuries, when the player is not coming back, they do tend to judge the team more on the games without him than with him. It's not entirely fair, but that is sort of the reasoning for pulling Baylor down the bracket. But still, even with all that into consideration, I can't see them being brought down further than the first four, which that's really the big storyline for me in this Big 12 tournament, Mike. Early on, maybe a Tuesday team gets to the quarterfinals and they might steal a bid. The top four teams are all getting good seeds. Really, the top five teams, the top 8 teams are probably going to the dance. And as we get into Friday and Saturday, the seeds will probably be pretty set. But Mike, we ended our last recap like this. Let's end this one too. Who is cutting down the nets on Saturday afternoon?
Give me Iowa State.
Wow.
Like I said, they played well in this tournament. They had a nice confidence boosting win. I truly believe they are one of the top 3 best teams in the Big 12. I think it's Houston, Texas Tech, and Iowa State. They've just got some bad seeding coming down when it comes down to it. But yes, I like the Cyclones to cut down the nets against Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game.
I think Texas Tech will also make the championship game, and I think they'll win it. And I think they're going to beat BYU in the championship.
Wow.
The Cougars are playing really good ball right now. They are. I think they might have a sneaky, very big fan presence there in Kansas City. The BYU fans are
Mormons travel.
Very, very much, they'll go wherever BYU plays in the tournament too. So I think, with little on the line for Houston, I think potentially they could get beat by a team that they're better than. But yeah, I have Texas Tech winning it all. I think Texas Tech is definitely the second best team in this league. And then I think there's 5 really good teams. And then maybe 6 or 7 teams that can make a Sweet 16. But the Big 12 might be a down year, Mike, but still plenty of opportunities to cut down the nets in San Antonio at the Final Four. And we'll be back probably later in the week to talk about the first couple rounds of this one and to see where, in the next bracketology projection where these Big 12 teams lie. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.